occupation in the West Bloc.
We must respect Indigenous rights and sovereignty. Yeah. Reconciliation needs to be more than a buzzword.
A shelter in Kenora is slowly reopening after closing its doors for nearly 45 days.
Homelessness can affect anybody at any time, and I always say, a lot of people are one paycheck away from becoming homeless.
And we meet a social worker, ribbon skirt maker, and motivational speaker who published her story in a poetry book.
My book, The Awakening of a Kukum Spirit in a Young Woman. This is my ribbon skirt and my Kukum's moccasins that she gave me.
Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. It was a busy weekend for Winnipeg police. Over the course of 2 days, multiple people were victims in a spate of violence that left 3 people dead. The first incident occurred Saturday night at a house party in the Tyndall Park area. Police found 2 females, a 14 and an 18-year-old, suffering from stab wounds. The 14-year-old has since died. The second homicide occurred in central Winnipeg on Sunday morning. 2 men were found in a back lane suffering from, quote, serious upper body injuries, unquote. Both succumbed to their injuries. They have been identified as Edwin Adrian Harper and Wayne Patrick Polidwar. The Winnipeg homicide count is now at 36. The record is 41 homicides set back in 2011.
I think the public would like us to be able to identify one root cause of these homicides, but the reality is there's a number of different issues that could be driving them. Methamphetamine has only been responsible for really a small number of those homicides. Firearm violence has been another driver. You look at, there just could be so many different things that are driving this.
Icy road conditions on a northern Saskatchewan road are being blamed for a heartbreaking triple fatal crash there Friday. 12-year-old Jerome Colanier and 1-year-old Kinsey Iron Colanier, along with a paramedic, died when a truck and an ambulance collided outside of the small northern town of Beauval, 4 hours north of Saskatoon. Investigators say the ambulance was responding to a call while roads were covered in slush and ice. At least 2 other people were injured. Residents of the flying community of Pangertung, Nunavut are upset that a massive load of food from the northern store wound up in the dump. The community experienced a power outage last week. When some of the food began to thaw, it was taken to the dump. Representatives from the northern store chain, which receives government subsidies to ship food to the north, have apologized, saying that they should have contacted the hamlet to explore alternatives before throwing the food out. As food prices are extremely high in the community, it wasn't long before residents were scavenging the dump to grab what they could.
Milk, yogurt, ice cream, some boxes where they had meat packs, fruit that could have been given nice and cleanly, orderly, without people having to go to the dump and pick through them and take what they can. That just makes me so mad. It's to use the word inhumane. I mean, I hate to see people have to go through that just to get food.
We want to hear what you think. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also find or follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. Last December, the emergency shelter in Whitehorse would see an average of 15 guests a night. Now the average is 50 to 60, and the level of violence in and around the shelter has gone up. Today in the Yukon, city governments say that better services will be provided to shelter guests and employees. The facility's 20 apartments, initially meant for transitional housing units, will be used now as permanent housing for individuals with complex support needs. Shelter staff will develop a peer outreach program to conduct safety checks. Paramedics will now be stationed at the facility 7 days a week, and First Nation programming, including culture circles, will be offered.
The Safe at Home Action Plan includes a vision for Whitehorse, a compassionate community working together to end and prevent homelessness, where everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home and can readily access the supports they need when they need it.
Nearly a dozen people associated with the Our Time movement briefly occupied the Parliament Building's West Block in Ottawa this morning. The group is pushing for action on climate change and Indigenous rights. After being removed from the premises, they handed out their version of a mandate letter to each MP arriving on Parliament Hill. A mandate letter is a document that the Prime Minister gives cabinet members outlining the government's priorities. Today, Our Time members listed theirs.
We must respect Indigenous rights and sovereignty. Yeah. Reconciliation needs to be more than a buzzword. With regard to climate and energy policy, this starts with fully implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and routinely listening to Indigenous communities in order to pursue the justice-based climate solutions that they have long called for. Yeah!
Canada's fight against First Nations children continues to unfold in federal court, at least when it comes to how much compensation each should get for being taken from their homes. But Cindy Blackstock of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society now has some evidence of what the government's next move may be. She joins us from Ottawa. So you were able to obtain an audio recording that involved Carolyn Bennett talking to some Ontario chiefs back on October 11th, where Bennett says that she wants to cut out organizations that deal directly with First Nations children in care. What do you think of the government trying to cut you and your organization out of this picture?
Well, I think it's problematic for a couple of reasons. One is that they're subject to an order to talk to the Assembly of First Nations and the Caring Society about the process for compensation, and they haven't fulfilled that order. It suggests that perhaps they want to have conversations with people until they get to somebody who will agree to have the conversation on their terms. But that it doesn't make any sense to us. We don't know why they won't sit down and just talk to us and try to work out a process that's respectful of the children and families.
Does it sound, are we reading this correctly, that they would rather talk about the kids that were in care? They want to have a direct dialogue with children?
Yeah, we find that very problematic if that's what they're intending to do, for a couple of reasons. One is the tribunal found that Canada's discrimination is ongoing. So it's not as if it's over, it's still going on. And the second thing is these are children, right? I mean, it's like, what are they going to talk to them about? What do they want to hear from these kids? What it's like to be removed from your family? What it's like to be denied a service? Are they going to try and negotiate the kids down on the amount? Like, it's completely unethical. And that wasn't even done in the IRS situation where we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission set up to hear those stories, an independent, culturally safe body. That we wouldn't have thought about putting survivors face to face with really the groups that perpetrated the injustice, Canada and the churches. Yet in this case, Canada seems to want to just have direct contact with the kids and forget about all of the tribunal or the representative organizations, and I think that's wrong.
Do you think that the motivation for this is that they want to base compensation based on not just you being wrongly removed and put into care, but that they want to tie it to how long you were in care, if you have suffered abuse or anything in care? Is that the gist of what you think they're up to?
Well, that's what they seem to suggest on the tape. But I think it's really important for people to understand that the $40,000 that they were ordered to pay does not stop any of those children or their families going for additional compensation under other actions like a class action or a civil action. Okay. This is a special penalty to Canada because it breached the Canadian Human Rights Act in a willful and reckless way. So I don't see how it would be to the advantage of children or their families to waive these human rights damages and somehow hope that Canada gives them a better deal under another set of circumstances. So I don't think the minister understands that this is a Canadian Human Rights Award and not a civil action where there's been mediation between these groups of adults who have been harmed and the government.
What's next in this case?
What's next is, despite the Prime Minister's statements and despite Carolyn Bennett's statements that they want to provide compensation, they didn't change their legal positions at a case conference with the federal court on Friday. So we will be going to hearing on this matter on November 25th and 26th in Ottawa to argue out the case. It's really sad to me that we have to still be fighting for kids to get fairness, but that's what's next.
Well, we will be following it as it winds its way through. Thanks so much, Cindy, for joining us to share your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, a somber anniversary for a Wikoba family whose loved one was found dead under suspicious circumstances. First, here's tomorrow's weather forecast.
Starting off on the East Coast, we've got 7 and rain in St. John's, 10 and sunshine in Charlottetown. Sunny in Happy Valley Goose Bay, 8 degrees. Same with Nain, Nekshwak is 3 and snow. Montreal is 15 and sunny. Gasp is 9 and sunshine. Sarnia is rainy and 16 degrees. Sault Ste. Marie, rain and 5. Big Trout Lake, snow and -1. Thunder Bay, sunshine and 4 degrees. -6 and snow in Puckatawaga, -4 and snow in Thompson. -3 and snow in Winnipeg, -4 and snow in Brandon and Dauphin. Snow and -7 for Regina, -6 and snow in Saskatoon. -9 and sunshine in Stony Rapids, -6 and sunny in Buffalo Narrows.
Welcome back. It's been 1 year since Cassidy Bernard's body was found in her home on the Wikoba First Nation. RCMP have yet to lay charges in the young mother's death, but the Mi'kmaq community will not forget. Angel Moore was there in Wikoba where she spoke with members of Bernard's family.
22 years old and a mother of twin girls. It's been a year since Bernard's tragic death in Wagaba, where her mother, Mona Bernard, found her daughter's lifeless body in her home.
I miss her every day because her laughter was just ring through. She just was that sort of person that brings the light into your days.
Cassidy's twins, Paisley and Maya, were in the home at the time of their mother's death and severely dehydrated. Mona now cares for them.
Getting through the day just by moving. It's every day. We have a lot of children that we have to take care of, and we're just focused on that and trying to make this life safe for them.
The RCMP said in an emailed statement to APTN that the death is considered suspicious and the investigation is ongoing. The family is understanding but wants answers.
And I understand, I really do understand that it takes long to collect evidence and do all this work, but it's really too long a year. It's long for us to wait. I'm afraid that pretty soon they're not going to find no answers.
Cassidy's sister Tyra says they need closure for the children.
I had my days where I didn't have no fate, and same with my mom and same with our family, where we would question why is this, why is that, why did we provide that information, but there's nothing being done about it.
A vigil was held last week to honor Cassidy and all missing and murdered Indigenous women. About 100 people lined the Trans-Canada Highway along Wagaba for 4,365 seconds for the over 4,000 missing and murdered Indigenous women, and 365 seconds for the days that they have waited for justice for Cassidy. Since Cassidy's death, her cousin Annie Bernard Daisley has become president of the Nova Scotia Native Women's Association.
We're told that her case is the #1 priority in all of Nova Scotia, which makes me think if she's the #1 priority in all of Nova Scotia, why is it taking so long?
There are signs and red dresses all over the community. Everyone has been affected, and they want justice.
We increased our security. We have a $100,000 reward out. We're going to keep demanding justice. We're not going to forget about this. We're not going to brush it under the rug. We're going to fight it till Cassidy does get justice.
The family will keep telling Cassidy's story until justice is served. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Wagaba First Nation.
The Kenora riding in northwestern Ontario saw a close race on federal election night, but it was Conservative Eric Malillo who inched ahead of Liberal incumbent and former Indian Affairs Minister Bob Nault and the NDP hopeful Rudy Turtle, chief of Grassy Narrows First Nation. In 2017, the Liberals promised Grassy Narrows a treatment facility for people living there with mercury poisoning. Malillo and Turtle met the day after the election to discuss what a new minority government means for the future of that centre.
Ensuring that we have the proper funding for the right sort of treatment centre in Grassy Narrows, and of course we look at many more, whether it's a First Nation community or municipality. We have infrastructure needs, we have healthcare needs across the region, whether it's access to culturally appropriate local services for healthcare, or building up some of the things that the projects we need, highways, water treatment, water lines. There's all sorts of infrastructure that I really feel has been neglected in our region for quite some time, and I'm going to be a strong advocate and a strong voice to help bring the proper funding to our region to help address those concerns.
Still in Kenora, there was a centre that was closed for 45 days in Kenora and it's in the middle of a soft reopening now as it transitions back to a fully functioning operation. Jolene Banning explains.
The homeless service hub in Kenora was shut down in early August after seeing a heavy flow of drugs through downtown. It's now open every evening from 7 p.m. to 8 a.m. and will be for the next 3 months. Patty Fairfield is the executive director of the Nietzsche Friendship Center that will oversee the shelter.
We know there's lots of services that could be used by patrons, but mental health and addictions right now, it seems to go hand in hand with the utmost need. However, people have to be ready to want to become involved in programming, and not everybody's there.
Steve Martin traveled across Canada, working odd jobs when he could, as he made his way to BC to visit family. He stayed at the Kenora shelter for a few weeks. He liked the facility, the workers, and got to know some of the regulars.
Because they don't have a home, they turn to alcohol and drugs.
Nietzsche Friendship Center is working closely with partners to fill in some healthcare gaps. Some partners include Kenora Mental Health and Kenora District Service Board.
So as much as some people work very hard to overcome their addictions, when you're in a small town and those are people that you've associated with, it's hard to break free.
But the homeless issue remains. Once you break free from addictions, where do you go?
Homelessness can affect anybody at any time, and I always say, a lot of people are one paycheck away from becoming homeless. Addiction can hit anyone at any time, depending on life circumstances.
The Kenora District Service Board says a 30-unit home is being built in partnership with Ontario Aboriginal Housing. It will be staffed 24 hours a day with a mental health worker for its residents. But it won't be an addictions treatment center. Steve Martin is a 60s scoop survivor. He understands where trauma stems from and how it can lead to homelessness.
I want to come back here to help a little bit. I want to take my money and just help out the people, the ones that are homeless and the ones that are addicted to drugs and alcohol.
More help will be available for shelter clients when it opens full-time in January. The Homeless Service Hub plans to offer life skills programming and counseling when it's operating 24/7. Jolene Banning, APTN National News, Kenora.
Time for us to take another quick break, but there's still more news ahead, so stay with us.
To northern Alberta, we've got -7 in sunshine in Fort Chip, -3 in sunny in Grand Prairie, -4 in sunshine in Edmonton, -4 in sunshine in Calgary, 9 in sunny in Campbell River and Tofino, 1 and sunny in Quesnel, 0 in sunshine for Dease Lake and Prince George, 4 in sunshine for Smithers, 0 in snow in Dawson City, 1 and snow in Mayo, 2 and snow in Norman Wells, -3 with a mix of sun and cloud in Wrigley. Snow in Paulituck and 4 degrees, -4 and sunshine in Fort McPherson, -8 and snowing in Cambridge Bay, +1 in Chesterfield and snow, -1 in Pangertung, mostly sunny skies, -7 and sunny in Arctic Bay.
Welcome back. Many BC First Nations are calling for stolen artifacts to be returned to the people who created them, and it's getting more support. CTV's Binder Sajan reports on the Royal BC Museum's efforts to correct a historical wrong.
Chief Snukialtwa drove 12 hours and took a ferry to come see family and cultural history.
It was on the gravesite, and it really hurts.
This totem pole from the New Hulk Nation from the mid to late 1800s was carved by his great-grandfather.
The story told in this pole is the story of Batsakot, a firstborn.
Smallpox nearly wiped out the entire population. Then the pole was apparently sold in 1897.
Well, I'm hoping to bring our grandfather's spirit back home to where it has come from.
After a traditional ceremony, Victoria's Royal BC Museum agreeing to help the nation bring the impressive artifact back home to South Bentnick land near Bella Coola. They'll be looking to the province to help cover costs.
As you can see, the gallery is now full, so it may mean having to move other poles, which we want to do respectfully as well.
The museum is considered a leader in repatriating cultural items stolen or taken from First Nations, a move motivated by the Truth and Reconciliation Committee and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
She heard from quite a few museums around the world. They see us as taking the lead on this.
It's important that our people and our families and the people that have passed on are able to go into continue their journey in their life after death.
The entire process could take years. For this chief and others, it's a symbol of a history lost, one they're hoping to reclaim. Binder Sujjan, CTV News, Victoria.
A woman in Saskatchewan overcame her addictions by turning to writing and embracing her culture. Now she's written and published a book of poetry about her journey. APTN's Priscilla Wolf has more.
I wanted to find a way to tell you how to empower women, how to understand what an empowered woman looks like. The most beautiful, powerful woman that came to mind had long black hair, wore buckskin hide, and carried the message of the sacred pipe.
Tala Tatusis is a social worker, ribbon skirt maker, and motivational speaker. Now she's also a published author and poet. Tatusis says her poetry book is her story.
My book, The Awakening of a Cookum Spirit in a Young Woman. This is my ribbon skirt and my Cookum's moccasins that she gave me. And this was just like a day I was doing poetry reading at Waniskewan. So I took a picture of myself. And there's a lot of pictures in the book of me and my family and some of the things that I've gone through in here. There's pictures that resemble those things.
Tatusis overcame an addiction to crystal meth and openly speaks at events to youth about her personal struggle. She found a way out by embracing her culture. One of the many ways was by learning to make ribbon skirts for herself and others. She says making and wearing ribbon skirts is healing.
This is a skirt. It's very sacred, and it's made with prayer, with smudge, and put a lot of energy into it. You don't wear these to the bar. You don't wear these to parties. These are something you'd wear in prayer if you go to a round dance or a powwow.
Tatusis adds, ribbon skirts help empower Indigenous women.
It's also a statement. It's a statement that Indigenous people are still here, and you can explain that. You can create a dialogue.
A dialogue that gets people talking about the positive Indigenous culture that keeps her sober and strong. Her book of poetry is her own journey of overcoming addictions and embracing her culture, Cree, Nakota Sioux, and Mohawk.
We Will Begin Again was written from a place of changing that narrative from Indian princess to authentic Indigenous human beings.
The book, titled Awakening of a Cookum Spirit in a Young Woman, is now available through Amazon. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Well, that is your news for this final Monday of October. I'm Melissa Ridgen, and I'll leave you now with an uncommon sight on a roadway near Grassy Narrows in northwestern Ontario, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.